Are weight loss drugs going to be the next AI? Are they hype or just fad? In this video, I'll be breaking down what they mean for stock market values, overall markets, and then potentially your investments as well. So welcome back, my name's Zoe, and this is my channel, Words on Wealth, where I break down all sorts of finance, investing, and money topics for you. Do make sure that you like, follow, comment if you're enjoying. I'm always all ears. And I'm relatively new to this as well, so any top tips are more than welcome. So weight loss drugs have actually been approved since around 2019, 2020. But they really hit the market by storm in around 2023. This was when they were approved for use in Europe, and amongst the most popular one approved for use was Wegovy, which was part of Novo Nordisk, the Danish pharmaceutical company's repertoire. They saw sales absolutely boom of Wegovy, and this caused Novo Nordisk's share price to almost double in the period of time between 2023 and mid-2020. This actually took Novo Nordisk to being the biggest company in the European Union by market cap, overtaking the likes of LVMH, the French luxury goods company, and other major automobile providers, such as Volkswagen. So what actually are weight loss drugs and why have they become such a fad? So the traditional weight loss drugs that were at least initially available are those that are blocking GL1 receptors. These are particular receptors in your gut that essentially make you hungry. So that all that these jabs are doing is basically stopping you from being hungry and allowing you to feel fuller for longer. Sounds relatively simple, right? Which is part of the appeal and partly why they have become so popular and, to all intents and purposes, so successful. The vast majority of trials, of which pharmaceutical stock prices are greatly influenced, there have been high levels of success with weight loss results. So what that means is that those on the trial who've been using the injections of Wegovy or any other weight loss drug for that matter have lost considerable amounts of weight. Now, it's said that, of course, this should be accompanied by changes in lifestyle, including diet and exercise, but it's, of course, the readily available and ease which make them quite so attractive, appealing, and, of course, popular. In the UK alone, it's estimated that over 500,000 people are now using these weight loss drugs. And that figure could be well out of date too, because what we're seeing is that more people are obtaining weight loss drugs, not necessarily through their GPs, but through other methods as well, either rightly or wrongly. Now, with growing obesity levels across the globe, not just in the UK, Europe or the US, but also in developing markets too, it's been estimated that the size of the market around the likes of weight loss drugs and other obesity cures could be up to $150 billion. This is big money, and it's not a problem that is going to go away overnight. But what Wegovy and other weight loss drugs promise to do is kind of make the problem go away overnight. Now, think back to when I mentioned those trials. If you're an investor in individual stocks, and you're thinking about pharmaceutical stocks, for example, then trials are superbly important for the stock value and the future long-term outlook of a company, and therefore their stock value too. If you're an investor that focuses more on broader themes, funds, or whole markets, it's still something you can watch out for, because I'll come back to the example of Novo Nordisk and quite how big of an influence they have, not just on the Danish stock market where they're listed, but also on the wider European index as well. So drug trials really give an indication as to how successful something's been, how successful it's going to be, and also what the profits and losses could therefore be from that kind of drug. It was when Wegovy's trial came out that investors really started to realise quite how much Novo Nordisk and their relevant weight loss related drugs, gosh, a lot of words there, could really become a success. However, what we've seen in the last few months is that other major pharmaceutical companies have had similar trials ongoing. They might not have been quite as quick as Novo Nordisk, but they too have now had other successful weight loss drugs. Eli Lilly and even innovative Biologics from China have both seen drugs go successfully through trials and have even released some onto the market. The other thing to bear in mind about drug trials is their patents. Now, usually what happens is that when a drug goes through a successful trial and then hits the market, it has some level of copywriting on it, if you like. Now, depending on what drug it is and where it is will depend on how long that copywriting lasts. As you can imagine, as and when that patent expires, there is, well, open ability to replicate and use that drug again. Now, I say open ability, it's not necessarily something that you or I can do, but the other major players in the industry certainly can. And this can greatly affect the potential for profits of whichever company it was that first released it, because there's now loads of competitors also doing the same. So the fact that Novo Nordisk got there first really helped to boost their share price, doubling the value in just over a year. Sounds pretty great, right? But this is where things have started to slow down. Other competitors have started to come onto the market, others have sought out patents, and some are cheaper and supposedly, in some ways, more effective, have different side effects, for example, too. And this is where the fad comes in and the potential argument for a bit of a bubble building up around these obesity and weight loss drugs. Because there is now question marks around how long individuals can be on these drugs for. Initially, the guidance was around 1 to 2 years, but there's also further guidance that suggests it can be indefinitely if monitored by medical professionals. Now, of course, I myself am not a medical professional, so none of this is medical advice or can be taken as such. But equally, what we can all see from the share price angle, from the trials angle, and from the competitors that are now entering the market angle is that there is question marks around it becoming potentially a bit of a fad. So what would this bubble mean for you as an investor? So if you are one of those stock investors that's looking at smaller pharmaceutical stocks, you may well be seeking out the latest trials of different weight loss drugs, or particularly looking at those competitors that have an edge, be it through lower cost solutions, be it through alternative side effects, for example. If you're an investor that has a broader view and invests into wider market funds, thematic funds, or indeed just wider portfolios, it's still something that you may want to consider. Think about Novo Nordisk. As I mentioned just earlier in the video, the size of Novo Nordisk was enormous on the back of these weight loss drugs. And when I say enormous, I mean the biggest company in the Euro Stoxx 50 by market cap. Absolutely huge. It engulfed the likes of LVMH, the French luxury goods company Louis Vuitton that has held the top spot for quite some time. Novo Nordisk absolutely soared, and this drove both the Danish stock exchange and the European stock exchange to new heights. Now, as that has started to dip because Novo Nordisk has seen their share price come down by nearly 40% as they've started to see other competitors come onto the market, for example, and take away what was pretty much their monopoly, we've also seen the effects on, for example, the wider Euro Stoxx and the Danish stock market too. Now, it's not necessarily negative. You'll see minute responses. If you line up, for example, the date that other competitors come out with trial results, you'll probably see a bit of a dip. Overall, things are still quite rosy. But it might make you question, what are the weightings, for example, within your portfolio or within your individual indexes or funds on pharmaceutical companies? If, for example, there's Novo Nordisk and other major competitors, it might be something that you're watching with caution at the very least around some of the potential for that bubble, as well as other trials that are due to come out. Generally, investors, regardless of whether they're picking individual stocks or wider funds, will aim for diversification. So a broad mix of different sectors, geographical areas, assets, and so on. So even if you are looking at these individual companies or areas in which weight loss drugs could be a huge influencing factor, you might still want to zoom out a little bit because there is that question mark over it being a fad as it stands. So they certainly could be big. Weight gain, obesity are problems that are facing the world that are not going away. We're seeing growing levels in emerging markets as well as in developed markets as well. And across the population, across the globe, obesity is a growing issue. Weight loss drugs present a relatively quick, seemingly simple and low-cost effective way for individuals and therefore as well governments and healthcare providers to help individuals lose weight. There are no guarantees, so make sure that you do your homework. Keep an eye out those broader investors on some of the shifting patterns of these weight loss drugs and how they can boom or potentially bust as well.